Started. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mondays with Maishi. Tonight we will be hosting Dr. Eliot Kaplan. Once again, I think you set the record for how many times you've been on Mondays with Maishi or thereabouts. Is it 3 or 4?
I think it's 3. I think
it's 3 times. Okay, third time participant, hopefully with new stuff to show this
third
time.
time's the charm.
Yeah, right. We have a small, intimate crowd tonight as we sit in the dead of the summer. We're finally past the heat wave here on the East Coast. Thankfully, it's been pretty brutal, but it's nice to see you all. Of course, for those of you who could turn on your videos, especially you new participants who we've never met before, we'd love to see faces and interact. The goal of tonight's discussion is to learn about the connection in therapy. How do we deeply connect with the client? How helpful is that? How necessary is it? How necessary is it to the therapeutic process? It's an old topic, but really probably the most important topic, which maybe we'll hear an informal statistic tonight that's been developed over the past 3+ years of Mondays with Maishi. Very excited to have Dr. Kaplan share that. But I just do want to make a couple of housekeeping announcements. Number one, of course, as I said earlier, for those of you who could turn on your videos, especially some of those new LSWs or LMSWs who just got their licenses over the past couple of weeks or just graduated from some of the social work programs. Congratulations and welcome as colleagues now, not as students, but as colleagues. So Yosef, that's a shout out to you, and Yaakov, and etc. Let's see who else is on here. That might be a new grad. I'm not sure. Okay. The other thing is that we encourage questions, and Dr. Kaplan likes to be hit hard in the gut and challenged. So please, if you have a question or a comment, hit the reactions tab on the bottom right of your screen. Raise your hand, and we shall take it. One last thing. Actually, one has now become 2, but we are now proudly sponsored. Mondays with Maishi is sponsored by 2 places. So the first one, the latest, is Shiffy Lieberman at Social Skills Made Simple. So for those of you who are looking for social skills to teach parents of children and to teach children, you want to check out shiffylieberman.com. It's SHIFI Lieberman, LIEBERMAN.com, where she has a curriculum and a newsletter, a weekly newsletter that she sends out. Really worthwhile. We actually had Shiffy present on Mondays with Maishi a couple of weeks ago. Really impressive, really good stuff. So check out shiffylieberman.com for Social Skills Made Simple and her book and her curriculum. And of course, I'm happy to announce that we are also sponsored by okclarity.com. okclarity.com is the only online platform for wellness professionals who work with the Jewish community to be found online. Their innovative directory allows users to search for therapists, psychiatric medication providers, coaches, and nutritionists for free. I am proud to have my very own OK Clarity website where potential clients can find me or simply learn about all I do. As a therapist, you know how we despise marketing ourselves. Enter OK Clarity, who does this for you in a professional and classy manner with actual results. When you're ready to invest in your online presence to increase your exposure and or your client base, reach out to OK Clarity, see if you qualify to join. They have a high quality assurance standards, and they vet every single professional in their onboarding process. So you can be assured if you see somebody on OK Clarity, they've been vetted and they are legit. Also, if you have WhatsApp, OK Clarity has an amazing WhatsApp status or groups with thousands of obsessed followers. Their WhatsApp is a free way to improve your mental health, find some great content to share with your clients, and they post great humor, so you'll laugh too. If you have WhatsApp, shoot them a message at 917-426-1495. That's 917-426-1495. And back with Dr. Eliot Kaplan. So Eliot, Israel, just remind us, you are a psychologist.
I have a PhD in psychology, and
tell us about
I'm a LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. Got the PhD from Temple University, and the social work degree is from.
Is that where Abe Lincoln got his degree too? Wasn't he?
Yes, I believe
wasn't he
so.
shot in Temple?
Yeah, a little like that. Not quite, but close. Yeah.
Okay. So okay.
Well, give me the title. You threw me when you sent out the invite, because admittedly I was expecting you to say paradox psychology, right?
Mhm, mhm,
So as I mentioned to you before, I think it's going to be a little challenge to me, because I want to phrase what I do without necessarily using the word paradox.
mhm.
Okay, so give me the title again so
So
that
it's
I
the
can.
process of connection in therapy. Because
Uh,
admittedly, for all those of you who are newer, you might not know, but I actually studied under Dr. Kaplan for the many years during the early years of my career, when Dr. Kaplan was still considered a kook because he was doing this
I'm
crazy
still
backwards.
considered a kook.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but you're gaining you've gained your notoriety has gained you some credibility. So back in the day, another colleague of ours who was also pretty new to the field, but a really brilliant guy, introduced me to Dr. Kaplan. He said, Maish, you got to watch this guy. Listen to what he says. Watch him online. What was he say? He's on to something. He is on to something. And so Dr. Kaplan sort of took me under his wing. We did a lot of correspondence, hundreds of emails, maybe thousands of chatting back and forth and on WhatsApp chat when I just learned about WhatsApp, I think, during that period. And we'd gone back and forth. And admittedly, I did agree that Dr. Kaplan was a kook. And it took me a very, very long time to grasp. And again, without the assistance of this other colleague who's a really brilliant guy, I would have probably dropped out. But as the two pushed against me, I learned that there's something more here that I wasn't understanding. And so I sort of had this challenge myself to, like, these guys know something that I don't know, and they're so sold on it that there's got to be something here. And it was the concept of paradox psychology. Now, Dr. Kaplan knows that since, as the years have gone on, we're talking about 10, 12 years ago, maybe more. And as we've both progressed, I sort of took it in my own little way of doing things, and he has it in his way of doing things. Of course, mine is right and his is wrong, but seems to be more
but I have the book, so
you
that's
wrote, and now, yes, you did write the book Paradox Psychology, which can be found on Amazon. So his is a lot more credibility because his is in a book, and his is also more effective than mine, but mine is the right way. So we have to make some sense of all these things that we're doing right now, and it sounds like we're spatting a little. But what is paradox psychology, and why, in heaven's name, did I title tonight's talk "Connection in Therapy"? If Dr. Kaplan only knows of one thing, which is paradox. So, Eliot, do me a favor. Could you answer some of those questions? Why did I call it the process of connection in therapy if what you're known for and all the work, time and your life's work that you've invested in this field is about paradox psychology? Give us the background of this discussion.
Okay. Well, I've been trained in Gestalt therapy. That was my entry into therapy, and Fritz Perls would a person would seemingly be nervous and they would be shaking their leg, and in my mind, okay, that you're shaking your leg. As a therapist, I would say, listen, calm down. You're here now. Just be calm. Take a few deep breaths. You don't have to be shaking. You don't have to be. And that seemed logical. That would be the logical thing to say. But Pearls didn't do that. He said, "Oh, shake your leg more. Exaggerate your shaking the leg. What is your leg saying as you're exaggerating that?" And that kind of grew, because once you can exaggerate, once you can express what's happening in the here and now, that's when you can move to the next level. In other words, the anxiety, the tension dissipates, and there's a natural shift that happens. It's not that the person is going to convince themselves to change, or oh, I should act differently now. It's not even a cognitive thing. It's just letting the tension go simply by accepting it. All of a sudden, it kind of just evaporates.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Fritz Perls, was Gestalt therapy. And in Gestalt therapy, just for some background for those of you who are not familiar, what he wanted to focus on is the here and now. Okay.
Right.
Now, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, I did a presentation on Fritz Perls. Actually, he died scores of years ago. I don't remember what year it was, but dozens of years ago.
71, I think.
Well, yeah, a long time ago. And I did a presentation a number of months ago on Gestalt, Fritz Perls' Gestalt therapy, taking the session that he had with Gloria and really breaking it down to explain what it is that he's doing. And what Perls believed, Eliot, correct me if I'm wrong, but what Perls felt was there's no need to go to your past, but not because he felt that there isn't a need to go to your past. It's because he felt that your past is playing itself out in the present moment. Okay.
That's
So,
correct.
so if I'm sitting with Dr. Kaplan, he's my therapist, and I'm shaking my leg and appearing nervous, it's because something about my past is playing itself out right in the here and now. It might be that Dr. Kaplan is the therapist, and he, to me, presents as an authority because he's the professional, and I have issue with authority. I have mama issues with authority. I have, my teachers in school and principals who used to beat me and put the fear of God into me. So I'm sitting here in front of this scary authority figure, right? So the past is just playing out in the present. So he said, forget about going to the past and exploring it. In fact, Gloria at some point tries to go to the past. Then he says, don't go to the past. Let's keep it in what's happening here and now. So he sees the entire past presenting itself here and now in the relationship. Okay. So he sees Gloria, or he sees his client shaking her leg, and he says, your leg is shaking. Okay, shake it more, exaggerate, bring it out. And Eliot, you're saying that the advantage of doing that, okay, many people at first thought he was just being scornful, right? They thought he was being cynical. But no, you're saying there's an advantage in him encouraging the exaggeration of the body movement, because what? If he encourages it, then he's telling the person, accept yourself. This is what you need to do now. So do it.
Correct. And not only is he saying accept yourself, he, as the therapist, is accepting the client. Okay, so there's a dynamic there that it's not just that the client, now the client accepts himself and the therapist is aloof. Pearls is giving the tacit approval of I'm with you together, and in being together, I approve that you have anxiety right now. I approve that you're nervous right now. And it turns out that that's actually a very key piece of the therapy, because generally people feel alone. Okay, that a core issue in therapy is that goes back to an abandonment issue, that I'm me, you're you, we're separate. But in working with a client, one of the main things you want to convey is that I'm with you. We are together. And that in and of itself is very powerful, is a very powerful part of an intervention, that we are together. I know when I was first learning about therapy, I was watching Carl Rogers. And I'm like, Carl Rogers is active listening, and he's repeating what the client is saying. And he's not giving any suggestions. He's not saying, oh, you should try this, you should try that. He's just saying, okay, so I hear what you're saying is this, and I hear what you're saying. He would just basically mirror what the client was saying. And I remember thinking, like, this guy's a lightweight. This guy, what's he doing? He's not doing anything. This is a waste of time. You got to tell the client, like, try this, try that. You got to do something. And now when I look at Rogers, I am amazed at the power of what he does. And all he does is that we are together. I hear you. I see you. I'm not judging you. And that in and of itself allows a person to calm down, to relax, and then to move on to whatever they need to do next. It's the peeling of the onion, as Fritz Perls would say.
Okay. So I want to stop there, because what you said right now needs to be really clearly understood and explained, so that because we can only move on if we really understand this concept. When you say it's me and you and I are together, it sounds very cliche. When you talk about me feeling alone from you, it's very, it sounds abstract. Could we put this into really clear, concrete terms? What do you mean when you say that I feel alone from you? Why is that so crucial to the therapeutic process? And then we're going to talk about how to get in to feeling the me and you, like Rogers did and Pearls did. So first talk about, what do you mean you and I feel separate and I need to feel connected? What does that mean?
Well, if you go back to the beginning, in the beginning, right? When you're in the womb, you're really one. You're one with your mother. And everything is wonderful. I mean, everything is, you're getting all your nutrients, you're getting you don't have to breathe even, like everything is, you are one with your surroundings, you're one with your mother. All of a sudden you're born. Now, if it's a healthy birth and the mother is able to hold the child and the child hears the mother's heartbeat, then there's going to be less trauma for the child, because in that moment of separation, of being born, that's a very critical moment. That's a critical time of what's happening. If you can imagine the confusion that a child must go through when they're born. It's like, wait a minute, all this time I heard my mother's heartbeat, everything was provided for me, and now all of a sudden there's lights that are shining at me. Where am I? Now, in that moment, if you feel I'm alone and isolated and separate, okay, that's going to have an impact on your psyche, right? So in terms of that separation can happen at birth. It can happen in 2 months. It can happen in 5 months. It can happen in 6 years. But at a certain point, you are certainly aware that you're separate. The question is how traumatizing is that separation? In other words, if you're in a family that's very loving, and yes, you're separate, but you have a loving mother, you have a loving father, and you're connected. There's a sense of connection and a sense of trust. But if you can imagine growing up and here your mother is alcoholic and your father's a drug abuser, and basically you have to make peanut butter sandwiches for yourself, you learn very early on that it's me against the world. And when clients come to us on whatever level, there's a certain sense, okay, that I'm me, I have my problem. Hopefully you're the professional, you're going to help me. But there's a sense that I'm in my aloneness when I come to you. So the therapy that I do is I simply try to help the client recognize that I see them, I validate them, I'm connected with them in a way that very often surprises them. They don't expect to feel seen in the way that I connect with them.
Okay, so I want you to hold on that for a minute. That's the next phase, which is, what are we doing in the therapy? But I want to clarify one thing. You actually said something tonight that I never fully understood, that was your intention. I thought that we can speak about this in isolated circumstances also, but now that I'm listening to you say it, I think you might be right about the general. So let's suppose I struggle with a specific phobia. I'm afraid of dogs. Okay. So I always thought it in terms of, if I'm afraid of dogs, I feel isolated and alone because nobody else really understands why I'm afraid of dogs. Dogs are so cute. They're so refreshing. They're so loving. Why am I afraid of dogs? So I feel kind of ashamed and isolated. And besides my fear of the dogs themselves, I also have this shame of myself that I'm afraid of dogs. And I always understood that the therapy is addressing that shame. What I'm hearing you say tonight on a deeper level is that if my attachment was really strong from the get-go, then I would be more accepting of my phobia. And I wouldn't feel so isolated and ashamed for being afraid of something or for being anxious about something. Okay. It's more that there's a more global experience of isolation that a person has, that when they struggle with a particular, let's just say in this case, phobia, they feel ashamed and alone. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that essentially a person feels that they're alone in the world. Yes. I mean, the hope is that if they felt more connected, the phobia would actually evaporate. In other words, like my mom is here, my father's here, and they're petting the dog. They're not afraid. Maybe I'll try. Okay. And then you see that people that you trust are able to pet the dog, then whatever phobia you had, it's not that you're told, oh, you don't have to be phobic anymore. You can stop that behavior.
We could do
No,
it
you're
like,
not
we
told
could
that
do
at
it by
all.
doing this or that, right?
Right. Just the fact that there are people that you're connected to, and you kind of like move into a bigger space, like, well, like people move into a wider space. Like initially I thought that I was afraid of dogs, so I can't have dogs come into my life. I'm in this little box. But now that I've trusted somebody, a therapist or my parents, and the box becomes bigger, now my box is bigger. Oh, okay, so now I can let in more experiences in life, and I don't have to feel phobic about it.
Okay. I'm not grasping that fully, but the part where I want you to talk about the part where when the person feels more understood and connected, how does that suddenly resolve some of these crises? But before that, we're going to take a question from y'all. Please unmute and
Yeah,
let's
let
hear.
me unmute. Yeah,
Mhm.
I also I teased you about it on the chat, but I really sincerely want to know understand it better. This idea that it all comes down to feeling that I am alone or I was alone. I'm hearing you say it again now. I think that's what I'm hearing Moshe wanting more clarification about, but or yeah, Moshe, you were seeking resolution, maybe more about how that's the solution. But I think in order to understand how it's the solution, we have to understand how it's the problem. Can you just understand more? Just this general idea that I've heard you say before, that it all comes down to feeling alone.
Yeah. By the way, I understand the concept of feeling alone. I didn't understand the concept of when it comes to a specific phobia. If you see other people who you trust be able to do it, then you'll be able to do it too. That's the part that
Well,
I
isn't that a way of not feeling alone?
not,
And yeah, sure.
not in my mind. In my mind, not feeling alone is going to be addressed in how we treat the person. In other words, by feeling aligned, by reducing the shame, then I don't feel alone anymore.
Okay, well,
We'll talk about that.
all right, let me basically, as people, we're different than animals. Okay, animals are finite, meaning that a dog can only do what a dog does. A dog runs by instinctual behavior. A dog is finite. A human being is a combination of opposites. In other words, we have a finite body. Okay, that we need to eat, we need to sleep, and guess what? One day we're even going to die because this finite body will one day expire. But at the same time, as people, we have infinite potential. Okay. Now, in therapy, what normally happens, and this alludes to the process of change, by the way. So, what I'm about to say is, I don't think anybody here may have even heard what I'm about to say. Meaning that there are two kinds of change. Generally, in therapy, the focus has always been on finite change. How are we going to change the finite behavior of this person, which includes their thinking, which includes their feelings, okay? Which is kind of fixed. There's a certain rigidity to this finite being that we live in. But because we have this infinite potential, that alludes that there's also an infinite potential in the process of change. Okay? So while a behaviorist is going to give a reward or a punishment to hopefully change the behavior, the finiteness of the person, it turns out that that's a lot of work. Okay? Whereas if we tune into the infinite part of the person, it turns out it's actually not work at all, because the reality of their existence, the reality of our deeper existence, is that we're infinite already. Okay? The person on the other end, the person that's sitting across from me, thinks that he's finite. There's a certain part of his life. He has a phobia. His phobia keeps him finite. So my job as the therapist is to somehow tune in and kind of indicate to that person, oh, I know you think you're alone, but really, 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 we're together, and we can work together on helping you overcome your sense of being finite in this little box around your phobia. Okay.
How can a finite person help another finite person reveal their infinity?
Well, okay, well, I try to be more aware of my infiniteness. So in other words, I'm in my infinite place. The person is in their finite place. And now my job is to help that person come up and into a broader, a bigger box. That's my job.
Sounds like, I mean, it sounds like the Maimer Vata Tetzava of a Rebbe be Megala the Etzem in another Yid.
Okay, I'm not sure exactly what you just said, but probably yes. Okay, well, yes, you want to help the person become bigger. In other words, the physical body is always going to be this physical limited body. But the way that we live in the world, okay, goes beyond that. Now, it turns out that, so, okay, so I'm talking about this infinite side of us. So what's the infinite side? And it turns out that it's the elephant that's been sitting in the middle of the living room the whole time, which is the alliance, which is the attachment. So attachment, there's an infinite quality in identifying with one's infinite self. Okay. So in other words, in therapy, I personally do not work on people's behavior. Now, it's not that, well, wait a minute, but your job is to change behavior. Your job is to help them change their behavior. Yes, that's true. But if I'm working on their behavior, then I'm working on their finite piece. It turns out if I can address their infinite piece, if I can attach, if I can create an alliance with that client, that in and of itself will shift the person's ability to live in a broader sense in the world.
Okay, that sounds very lofty, like a lofty goal, but you really make it very simple.
Okay.
Let's.
So if I can suggest that, we have the video.
Yeah.
It's about 8 minutes. But what I want to point out is I'd like to show the video now. I want people to note that at no point do I tell this client to change. Okay, I don't tell anybody to change. You don't, in fact, I tell people you don't have to change. But what I do is I simply become Carl Rogers. Okay, and in being Carl Rogers, I warmth, empathy, genuineness, acceptance, unconditional positive regard, and I avoid power struggles. That's all I do. Okay, and I work in the here and now. So from Fitzgerald's, I work in the here and now.
And you use humor, which I don't think
And
Rogers was capable of.
And the humor part is what I call Bugs Bunny. So in other words, there's certain absurdity. In other words, if a person is stuck in a phobia about puppies, like puppies are like cute little puppy, and you're afraid of this puppy, that's absurd. Okay, there's certain absurdity that the person is living in. So part of the therapy is to kind of jump into that absurdity and kind of match the absurdity with the client. And what you'll see in the video is that, like I said, at no point do I tell the client to change. And all I do, it's like, the change that happens is that it's going to be a mother and a son, right? The mother is going to be off camera. The son is going to be in the room. What I do as the therapist is I become part of the system. In other words, their finite system is the two people, mother and son, right? They come in, they're just those two people. If I do my job right, I become part of the system, meaning that now there's three of us together. As soon as there's three of us, that means that the system will automatically change. Okay?
Because it's a different system.
It's a different system.
Right.
Exactly.
So Doc, I just want to take a question from Yoel so that we can, because what I'd like to do is we're not going to be able to record the video that I'm about to play. So we'll try to give a quick reiteration afterwards for the people watching on YouTube. But let's take a question from Yoel first.
Yeah.
Hi. So quick question. I just want to make sure that I'm really understanding the intervention, like the leaning in, so your leg shaking, keep shaking. And I'm so glad that you mentioned Carl Rogers because my mind went there right away. So is what you're doing fundamentally, I'm a Carl Rogers therapist. I'm accepting you, and by me accepting you through the relationship, you can start accepting yourself. And I'm not asking you to change, right? I accept you warts and all. And I guess those parts of ourselves that maybe we don't like, that we disowned, you can start accepting it, and the relationship, and you mentioned the attachment, that's where the real healing happens. So is there intervention of me saying, continue doing that? Is that just, I guess, a manualized version of Carl Rogers? Like, yeah, I'm going to normalize and validate it to the point that I'll even encourage you to do it. Is that basically what's happening? I just want to make sure I got it.
Well, I try to go to a place where, again, unconditional positive regard. I don't want to convey that I'm judging the client. I'm here. I hear that you're suffering. I hear that you're struggling. My sense is that you're struggling with it in terms of, however the client presents it, and I'll mirror how what they've told me. So it's very important that I want the client to know that I'm hearing what you're going through. Okay, and that I'm with you. So the bottom line is that the client senses that, oh, okay, this therapist hears me. They're with me, and they're not telling me to be different and to do something different. And what I'm saying is that it's surprising, because the logical mind says, yeah, but you got to tell them what to do now. That's what the logical mind says. And what I'm saying is that counterintuitively, it turns out you don't have to tell them what to do. Just the very fact that I'm with you, I'm making your box is bigger. You came in here thinking that you were alone. It's you and me, and I'm going to try to convince you to be different. And I'm saying, no, we're together.
But Eliot, I think Yoel's question is, are you doing something more than Rogers, or better, let's call it, than Rogers, by prescribing that the client continue doing it because you're showing more positive regard than Rogers? And I think the answer is yes. That's what.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's what he's looking to do. He's looking to show.
You're normalizing it to the point of, I actually would tell you to keep doing it even. That's how much I'm normalizing it.
Yes, and by the way, that's the absurdity, right? That's the absurdity. That's crazy. Why would you tell the client to shake their leg more? That's exactly what you're trying to the client.
So I don't know if you have time. Can I have a quick follow-up? Would you prescribe the same thing when it's actually a destructive behavior when talking about heavy drug use?
With something like heavy drug use,
because they might just continue and kill themselves because they're really in the throes of addiction.
I understand that, but part of it is that you have to at least let the client know that right now you're trying to cope. The way you've learned to cope is by using drugs. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest with you. If you keep using drugs, you'll probably kill yourself. I mean, if you keep doing the same thing. Now, the question is, are there other ways to cope rather than just using drugs? Right now, if there's no other way, then we have to acknowledge, or at least do you understand that you're going to kill yourself? Okay. Now, if you recognize that if you kill yourself, that means that you're not going to see your kids grow up. You're not going to see other parts of your family, your brothers and sisters. But if that's your choice, I can't stop you. Right. In other words, I want to make it clear to the client that I'm not here to convince you to stop using, but the question is that the only way that you can cope? Right, that's the question I want to leave the client.
And I could also normalize that I understand if you make that choice because you're in that much pain, and I'm not here to convince you otherwise.
Right, and exactly what you just said, to say to the client, you must be in so much pain that the only way that you can figure out how to cope is by using drugs. Wow, that must be so hard, but I don't know that I could do what you're doing, but obviously you must be in so much pain. And for the client to hear that somebody understands, wow, yeah, I am in pain. Wow, and this person understands me. It's like a breath of fresh air that you're giving that client.
Right, but it has the paradoxical effect that they actually become calmer when they hear you, when they feel really deeply understood, and that paradoxically decreases their need to do those behaviors.
Correct.
Eliot, real quick. Eliot Kaplan has been the most attended person on Mondays with My Sheep, with a attendance rate of, I would say, 85 to 95% on our over 100 shows. And one question that he's asked most of our presenters, or at least 50% of our presenters, okay, every week he comes on and asks this question: what percentage of therapy would you say is dependent on the relationship? How much of the therapeutic alliance is what makes the therapy happen? Tell us about some of the results. What have you heard from from the therapists and the experts that have been on the show.
Right. Well, normally, I mean, people might say 80%, like, there was one presenter who didn't know what I was talking about at all. Like he had no idea the alliance, that was not his thing. But usually in therapy, there's a saying that, some therapists will say that the alliance is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Okay, yes, you need the alliance, true, but really, then you have to do the meat and potatoes of the therapy,
As
which
Judy
is really
Beck,
the cognitive
Judy Beck told me
intervention.
that. Judy Beck said that straight up.
Yeah. So basically, from my perspective, I'm going to throw out a number. I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get into it. If you get my book, you'll see why I'm using this number. The alliance is at 99.85 of of the therapy. Okay, so that you can get a sense that which means that behavior and emotions are literally 0.15 of the change process. So from my perspective, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, you really just do the attachment, and that in and of itself will shift the client.
Ditto. All right, let's get to our video. I'm going to turn off the recording and we'll be right back after these. Okay, so we just watched the video where Dr. Kaplan worked with a adult son and his mother and instructed him and actually taught him how to continue to manipulate his mother, as that's been that had been the pattern, the ongoing pattern. And then a couple of weeks later, he came back and said, no, he's happy you're not manipulating her. So tell us a little bit about what went down in that session.
Well, again, if you're looking at the session and you don't, hopefully I give a little background that I'm trying to simply enter the system. The usual way that we try to look at sessions is, okay, what's the behavior that he's working on? Like, how is he working on the behavior? And on one level you can say, oh, he told the client that he should manipulate his mother, but really, he was using reverse psychology, and he really didn't want the client to manipulate the mother. But the problem with that is that's still, I'm working on the behavior, okay? And ultimately that can backfire, because the client will come back and say, oh, I figured out what you were doing. You were trying to trick me, and I figured out what you were doing. So that's never good for the alliance if the client feels that the therapist is tricking them. But simply what I did was I just kind of acknowledged what the mother was feeling. So I aligned with the mother, I aligned with the son, and I basically said, okay, and when you leave here, you're probably going to manipulate your mom, just like you've always done, either by threatening suicide or by running out of the house. So we can even plan on it now that that's what you're going to do later. Now, in my mind, what happened is that I was able to join the system. So in other words, later when he had this thought, oh, maybe I'm going to run out of the house, I'm kind of standing next to him and I'm going, yeah, go ahead, run out of the house. You always run out of the house. But now in that moment, it's like, oh, wait a minute, but I don't know if I really want to do that now. In other words, the client themselves is uncomfortable with the old system, and they themselves will make the change. And what's interesting is if you ask this client, why did you change? Very often the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. I just decided to change. I'm not even sure why I did that.
So somehow in joining the system, where the client doesn't feel alone anymore, this repetitive behavior was because the client's feeling alone, and this is what's working for them.
Right. And within that system, in other words, even though it's the mother and the son, that system is alone. Between them both, they play this little game back and forth, and they're alone in the world against the rest of the world. And by me simply joining the system, saying, oh yeah, I know the system. Yeah, you guys are going to do this forever. We're going to plan on it together, you and me. Now I'm part of the system. All of a sudden,
you even framed it. You framed it in a way that said relationships start with good communication, And this is a communication, an ongoing, pervasive communication that the two of you have. That's
Right.
you're expecting of each other, and so it's perfect.
Right.
So let's communicate outright. Hey, mom, I'm gonna manipulate you. Hey, mom, this is how I'm gonna manipulate you. I'm gonna do this and that. Like, let's be open about it. Let's come out of the closet and just be open and comfortable.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Now, in watching this, you might say, okay, so this is kind of like motivational interviewing. Okay. And the question is, what's different about motivational interviewing as compared to what I do?
Well, what's the same? Isn't motivational interviewing more about eliciting motivation? Cultivating motivation, having the client figure out why they would be motivated to do something different. And over here, you're actually calming the anxiety that's behind it, if I understand it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. My view of motivational interviewing is that you're still working on the behavior. That somehow I'm trying to get the client's trust, and once I get the client's trust, then they'll be able to, have a different way of viewing things. But the focus I see in motivational interviewing ultimately is on the behavior. Whereas what I do is my agenda, my personal agenda in the therapy is to simply create the alliance to
Your agenda in the therapy, if I could clarify this, there's two parts to the agenda. There's what is the therapist doing and what's the result that's happening. If I understand correctly, the therapist, you as the therapist are trying to again cultivate that attachment, that alliance. But ultimately what you're trying to do is to create self-acceptance.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think I do that. Because I can't make the client accept themselves.
By you being accepting of them.
Right, that's what I do. I accept them, and all of a sudden now the client has this experience of, wait a minute, this person accepts me where I'm at. And now I thought I was in this little box, but he accepts me with my anxiety. So all of a sudden my anxiety kind of lifts. It kind of evaporates a little bit. And now I don't feel my anxiety as much. I don't even know why I don't feel so much anxiety, but he just seems to accept me with my anxiety, and now it's gone. So it's that.
So where Rogers would say is that helps the person to accept themselves.
Yeah. Okay.
Because again, I think that what's behind the pathology, the psychopathology, is that neurosis, that I don't accept myself and I can't be this way and I have to be different, et cetera, et cetera. And by you being the all kind, all loving father or mother in the picture, you're actually conveying that you are acceptable, that the client is acceptable. And if that message is reiterated enough times, they'll begin to experience it. And that's the corrective emotional experience. In the way
right. But I even go the step further and say, not only is your anxiety acceptable, I like your anxiety. So I'm going to help you what can we do to make you more anxious? What can we think of that will make you more anxious? And the very fact that I'm kind of encouraging the anxiety in a strange way dilutes the anxiety.
Right. So here's where you and I differ in our approach, where we spat. I like to identify with the client why their anxiety is adaptive for them, why their quote unquote negative behaviors are actually adaptive and functional for them.
Okay.
And by doing so, I feel like I'm setting up the intervention better, right? I say, okay, I think I understand why it's important for you to get angry at your spouse and yell at them. You get angry at your wife and you yell at her because it protects you from when you felt unheard when you were a child, blah, blah, blah. And then I can encourage it because it makes so much sense. It can be encouraged, which puts the client in this double bind, or it puts them in this bind, I should say, where it's like, yeah, but I don't want to yell at them. And what you're saying is also true. So I feel very connected right now, but I'm also feeling confused. Okay.
Right.
What you'd like to do is you like to not make sense of it and just tell them to do it. You like to assume that there's a reason, assume that there's a motive, without identifying it with the client. So, encourage them to do it, which I find to be more confusing to the client and my approach to be more understanding to the client. Like I'm almost making a compelling argument. So tell me
Right.
about why you do it your way, or am I correct in my
Well,
assessment?
I think the truth is that the way that we all work with clients, and by the way, you'll notice that any client that you work well with, you have a connection. And when you have that connection with whatever client you're working with, inevitably the client is able to change. It's the clients that are resistant, that are refusing to create that alliance, which is what it comes down to. Those are the clients that we have the difficulty with, where in the work that I do, I look for the client's resistance and then I join the resistance. So I help them resist better, is what that comes down to. But what I was going to
That's
say,
a really important wait. That's a really important point. Don't leave that out. That's one of the main keys of your intervention, right? You would encourage the client to resist because you're acknowledging the necessity of their resistance, and you trap them, right? You put them into a double bind where if they resist, then they win. Right? I had this with my 2-year-old son tonight, where he was really, really tired and cranky, and he was saying no to everything. So I started to tell him that he should say no. Right. So I said to him, say no. And he said no. And I said, hooray. I said, now say no. And he said no. And I said, hooray. And he was like, hey, wait a minute. What am I supposed to say? I can't say yes because I have to say no, but Tati's telling me to say no. So he's in a double bind where he automatically wins. If he says yes, then great, because he said yes. And if he says no, then he gets applauded for it, right? So that's the
Right.
intervention that you believe very much. And join the resistance, right?
Right.
Is about the client winning no matter what.
Correct. The client, as soon as the client feels that they win, that takes away their sense of their sense of separateness, right? Because now we have that connection. But what I was going to say is I think that people have their own style of how they do the therapy. So, as you're explaining how you might tell a client why they have to do it, the truth is, given who the client is, I might do the exact same thing. Okay, yes, I'm not only do you need to do the behavior, I'm going to tell you why you should do the behavior. And in that way, that's how I'm going to join with that client. But I think that each person, in doing the process,
Right.
you'll see that each person, that when your client is going to be moving in therapy, when your client is going to be changing in therapy, you'll always notice that the therapeutic alliance is present as part of the therapy.
Right. So again, in my mind, if I can connect with the adaptive part of why they're doing their behavior, then we're creating a deeper alliance. It's easier for me to encourage it. But
Right.
you somehow have this uncanny way of, like, I'm also wondering how much of it is my own anxiety that's getting in the way. Like, why can't I encourage the client to continue their behavior or improve their behavior without explaining to the client how helpful it is for them? I'm wondering if it's my own anxiety that's afraid that the client's going to think I'm crazy or I'm a kook, right? Or if what I'm doing is legitimate. Like, do you find that when you encourage absurd behaviors without explaining why they're helpful, that clients ever walk out on you or get angry at you? Or
No, I think that people go into confusion, but for me, confusion means that the mind, that there's an imbalance that's just happened. In other words, if a client walks in and they can keep it all together and they walk out in the same fashion that they're all together, that means nothing happened in therapy, right? So if a client gets confused, that means that there's kind of a reorganization that's happening in their mind. Wait a minute, I thought that it was this way, but now it's this way, and he's telling me to keep doing it. Why would he tell me to keep doing it? That's crazy. Nobody ever told me about it. Everybody's trying to get me to stop me from doing it. And they walk out and they go, well, I don't know what just happened. But to me, that's a good sign, because it means that there's something that shifted in the client, and now that they have to reorganize what's happening inside.
I don't know, Moshe. Dr. Kaplan has told me many times, like, you can build a case, like you're saying, you have to do this because of all these reasons. Like you're saying, Moshe. I'm not sure if there's much of, I don't know. I'm not. Dr. Kaplan's not saying it, but it sounds like, I don't know. I think you guys just do the same thing. Dr. Kaplan finds the reasons for why this person's doing it, and he's saying you have to do it, and we know why, because if this doesn't happen, this is gonna fall apart. That's not gonna work, and prove to the client you gotta do it. Is that what you're saying, Moshe?
That's what I'm saying, but I'm saying in all the years that we discussed paradox, Dr. Kaplan was much more insistent that it's not necessary, and you can just tell the client, you can just insist that the client continue that. You can work much more in the here and now.
Right.
Girls-
When I insist that the client does a behavior, all I'm doing, I'm just being in the here and now with the client. I'm not trying to.
In other words, you work more in the here and now,
Right.
without caring so much about the history and why the whys that it's necessary, and the particular. I always like to make a case for the client. So again, that is, I think that's a difference in our style of approach. And again,
Right.
I'm admitting that it may be my own anxiety, but when I think about it, it still makes more sense to me.
Right.
But Dr. Kaplan does his effectively, so that's right.
Well, I mean, the truth is, a lot of times I'll be in the middle of an intervention, and I know that what I'm doing is absurd, and probably doesn't have a logical explanation to it. But I know that if I'm connecting to the client, that's my agenda. To connect to the client.
It's like if you speak process language, then content doesn't. If you can toot like a dolphin, there's no words coming out, but they get what the other one's saying, right?
Right.
So you're saying you're just looking for the process, and we're to hit them in the process, and then the words could just be gibberish.
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
I think we'll process therapists, we'll agree with that. Okay, any questions on this?
Now, by the way, those who are watching and listening, if you feel confused right now, that is good. Because I think that what I present is like, it's a mirror image really of what people expect to hear in therapy. That, okay, you have to be gentle with the client, and you have to be you try to understand them, and I think that I'm more aggressive, but again, everybody has to have their own style, and like Moshe says, he's comfortable giving the client a reason why he should do it, but the point is that I think that if you're feeling a little confused, maybe you can watch the video again at a later time, but to hear more, or to get my book. Moshe, can you show my book?
Of course. Let's take a question from Gregory. Go ahead, Gregory.
Thank you, Moshe. Thank you, Dr. Kaplan. This is actually not so much a question, but an observation. I've had the privilege and the pleasure of sitting in for close to a year now in weekly sessions, mostly with Dr. Kaplan. And one of the things that I've heard observed that seems central to me, to what you guys are talking about, that I didn't hear spoken about tonight, but that seems central to this, is the idea of going back to Carl Rogers, of the power play being removed, that the power dynamics being removed. And to sort of tie it back, at least from my experience and perspective, to what Dr. Kaplan was referring to about the animals being limited, and then human beings, my language, not Dr. Kaplan's, but of that, the place inside of us that has the divine or the infinite as, and then residing in there, that there's something, it seems to me, that as soon as we move into, as we saw, as I experienced Dr. Kaplan in each of the interventions, residing in the infinite, to me, that's part of the elimination of the power play. That then I've heard some therapists, I think Terry Real, when he was on, talked about this, but the idea of, in therapy, what essentially we're doing is the client is borrowing our prefrontal cortex for the duration of the session. But I think there's something else that goes on in what Dr. Kaplan is demonstrating and observing. By being in the place of the infinite, or the self, that we're inviting, he's inviting the client or the clients with the mother and son to step out of their own internal power play and right and wrong, conditioned, limited thinking into this field where their agency, where it's just clearly available, even in the absurdity of the paradoxical intervention. Wow, I can do that. There's no resistance. There's no struggle. And then all of a sudden there's like a landing in, oh, wait a second, I have agency. And it just seems to me that that's part of what opens up the field to go, oh, I can actually make a healthy choice that's going to really serve me, rather than taking on the compensatory strategies that have served me in the past and been part of my, yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just showed the book on Amazon, by the way, and it says that you can get a new copy for $33.33, and a used copy starts from $52.34, which I think is a fabulous paradox. But if anybody wants to know what the reason for that is, it's obviously because once you read the book, you'll realize how valuable it is, and and it's just worth more afterwards. Let's take a question or comment from Yoel. Caroline, go ahead. You'll have to unmute.
There we go. Yeah. Okay. So I love that. And it actually leads in, I have a few, I'm confused. So here we go. But how much is the humor part of it? The revealing the infinite that you wanna reveal in the client, in the video. How much was it when you asked the client, the son, you asked him, how good are you at manipulating him? And he smirked, he smiled, and he's like, yeah, and he's like 12. So that there was, calling that humor. It seems like that was, a very significant point of joining, and it was a very significant point of, call it, reveal the infinite. So that's one question. I also posted a different question, which is actually, if this is your method, but am I not correct that I heard you say in a different presentation, Eliot, that you don't start with paradox and you only go to paradox if your plan A isn't working? And if I did hear that correctly, why?
Yeah. I mean, a good point. Thank you. I forget to mention, paradox is for the resistant client. So in other words, if you use paradox when the person first comes in, okay, oh yeah, you should continue yelling at your mother, right? No, but I'm coming into that I don't yell at my mother, and you're telling me if you do that in the first session, then the client's going to walk out and go, this guy's crazy. I'm trying not to yell at my mother, and he's telling me to continue to yell at her. That doesn't make sense. So I'm not going back.
Right. Like I would not buy your book used for more until Moshe explained it. Once he explains it, now I'll do it.
Right.
Well, why is that the case? Why is that true? If, again, using the way I use it, which is to identify the value and how helpful it is, right? So why wouldn't I say, it sounds like, I appreciate that you came in saying that there's a part of you that wishes that it didn't have to be this way. And I think we've identified that it has to be this way. And the more we keep it this way, the more safe you'll be in whichever way.
Well, I wouldn't do it in the first session, simply because I would say to them, well, what have you tried? Maybe you can go home. Maybe we can try to view it differently. Try to realize that you don't have to yell at your mom. Maybe you can just go straight to your room without yelling at your mom. In other words, if I go straight into the absurdity of it, then the client, my sense is that the client's going to be threatened by that. I'm here to get help, and you're telling me to keep doing it. Okay, so in other words, if there's 1 session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions, and by the 4th session, if I've given suggestions, straight suggestions, Did you try it this way? Maybe you can think of getting a reward. Maybe like a behavioral reward. If I see that those are not working, at that point I'll say to the client, you know what? We tried cognitive behavior. We tried we tried psychoanalysis. We tried not psychoanalysis. We tried psychodynamic. But you're still doing the behavior. So maybe it seems to me that maybe you need to continue to do it. You've tried other things. It's obviously not working. I'll tell you what, why don't we plan that you're going to yell at your mom? Let's plan on it. When you walk in, she's going to tell you to wash the dishes. I know she's going to ask you to wash the dishes. And when you walk in, let's just plan. You'll yell at her as usual. So at that moment, again, I'm attaching to the client. I'm talking about the behavior, but really the behavior in my mind is secondary. I'm talking about washing the dishes. I'm talking about him yelling at his mother. But my goal is to help the client realize that I'm standing next to him. That when he goes home, because he's going to walk out and say, yeah, but that's crazy. I came into therapy. I told him that I didn't want to yell at my mother. Yeah, I am yelling. It's 3 weeks already, but my goal is not to yell at her. I don't know why he would say that. And then he goes home, and then just like we planned, his mother says, you just got home. I'd like you to wash the dishes. And in that moment, when she says, I'd like you to wash the dishes, my shadow comes up, and I'm going, go ahead, yell at her. You always yell at her. And in that moment, if that's the fraction of a second that the client has a choice to do something different. But in that moment also, the very fact that I'm standing next to him, I'm saying, go ahead, yell at her. The system is different because now he's not alone anymore. He's now got company who's telling him the wrong thing, but it's still company. I'm still standing next to him.
Okay. Any last questions or comments before we sign off for the night? I think this was very clear, clearly elucidated. Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I see Gregory has a question.
Gregory, you got to learn how to use the reactions tab on the bottom so we can see you on your screen, but go ahead. Oops, sorry, I meant that.
Thanks. I was just going to write it in. It's very quick. I'm reminded in the moment of the Viktor Frankl quote, between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space is our freedom to choose. And it seems like that the alliance itself creates a little more of that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think what he's saying is true. What he's saying is true, Gregory. In other words, what the alliance does is it disables or diffuses some of that tension that the person has, that they need to be repetitive. If you really study people, you can watch how repetitive they are. I like to do it in places of worship, in shul or synagogue, when somebody gets an aliyah or whatever it is, you can see that they literally repeat to the T what they did the last time. Somebody who says Kaddish, they literally repeat there's very little new, or in their behaviors. It's almost like a trance, right? And when you open something up, then there's room for change to happen. I don't know if anybody understands or appreciates what I'm saying, but
I got it. Yeah, thank you.
Moshe, I'd like to give an example where I would create, I would be a verbal one, a verbal case that I had where I created an alliance that was very provocative. Okay, do we have a few minutes?
yeah.
Okay, so I had a client who came in, who the wife calls me and she says, my husband's having an affair. I want you to see him. I want you to see my husband Ken, and I want the marriage to continue, and I want you to see him. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we'll do couples therapy. They'll come in as a couple, and they'll communicate better, and then they can go on their way. After they communicate better. So I suggest to the wife, can you come in with him? And this way, we'll work on communication, and hopefully the relationship will be better. She says, no, I don't like that idea. I just want you to work on him, you to work with him, and you make him better, and then have him come home. Okay. So I said, well, at least come in for the first session. So she agreed to that. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, she'll come to the first session, and then after the session's over, she'll see how it's really helping the communication, and maybe she'll come back for the next session. So she comes in and she gives me her side of the story. He's having an affair. I don't know who it's with, but he really has to stop. I don't like it. In the meantime, the husband's not saying anything. He's saying very little, just nodding his head, not saying much. And at the end, I said, well, I think we had a good session with wife, would you come in again? She goes, no, you just see him alone. I just want you to see him. So I don't know if you've ever had clients like this, but the guy would come in, he literally would not say a word. He's not saying anything. Just, it's like pulling teeth. I'd ask him questions. It's yes, it's no, sitting in silence, but nothing really of anything to work on. This happened 1 session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions. By the 4th session, I'm figuring, like he comes in, and these clients are draining, that even though they paid their fee, you're dreading when their session comes up because nothing's going to happen. So in my mind, I don't know whether he's seeing somebody else really, or he's not seeing somebody else. What I did get out of him was that it was an old girlfriend from high school. But I really didn't have much to work on with him. So I decided that in creating an alliance, I was going to do something very provocative. And what I decided to do was I told him, listen, I don't know if you're seeing a girlfriend or not. I really don't know. But if you are, my suggestion is to go out and get another cell phone. And in getting another cell phone, you talk to her on that cell phone. That would be a private cell phone with your girlfriend. You leave the phone in the car. You can charge it in the car. And in the meantime, you'll have your conversation with your girlfriend. Your wife won't know about it, and you can go on with your life. Like everything will be fine. The guy doesn't say a word. So after the session, I'm thinking, okay, 4 things can happen. Thing number 1 is nothing happens, right? In other words, he just comes back to the next session. We're just right back where we started. Where he's just quiet and doesn't say anything. That's number 1. 2 is he can come back the next session and say, I thought of your idea, but it's an interesting idea, but I don't know that I can't do it. I didn't buy the phone, but it's an interesting idea, and now we have something to talk about. Now we have we can talk between ourselves, like why was it a good idea? Why wasn't it a good idea? The third thing that can happen is he might come back and he might say, you know what? I bought the phone, right? I went out, I bought the phone. That was a great idea. Thank you. And at that point, we can now at least talk about that. Why, what's the relationship with the girl that you thought it was important to get the phone? But now we have something to talk about. The 4th thing that could happen is that he might go back and tell his wife what I said, right? That's a possibility. We don't know. So a day later, I get a text from the wife. The wife says in the text, "You are the worst therapist in the world. I am going to blog about you. I'm going to tell everybody. I'm going to ruin your business. I'm going to put you out of business. You are the worst therapist. Kenny told me what you said, and I can't believe that you would ever tell him that." So you can imagine when I got the text, I was a little taken aback, like she's going to put me out of business. But I texted her back. It took me a little time. I had to compose myself. I texted her back, and I said, "Okay, I hear what you're saying, but you only heard one side of the story." And she texts back. She says, "Yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay, what's your side?" And I said, my side is that, and I'm not saying that Kenny's lying. I'm saying that what I told him was that I had another client who actually had a girlfriend on the side, and he got a phone. And as you know, and I know, the wife always finds out about it anyway. And that's what I told him. I said, if you really want to do this, then go out and get a phone. That's what I told him. So she texted me back. She says, yeah, Kenny sometimes mixes things up and and he makes mistakes. Okay. And it ended up that I sent her, I said, no hard feelings. And she said, yeah, no hard feelings. And we ended on that note. But in terms of the intervention, whether they know it or not, it was successful because she came back and part of what she said was, I know he's going to come back to me. The very fact that he told her what I said in the session and how off the wall it was meant that in her mind she realized that obviously he's not getting the phone, right? It was a crazy idea. He's not getting the phone, and obviously he's going to come back to me because this is something that he felt important to tell me.
Right.
So yeah.
So in other words, in effect, what happened was you created a relationship between the two of them. I don't know if that's how you're saying it, but he went back to her, they riled
Yes,
against
yeah.
you, and you were the pawn, but the two of them now have a relationship going.
Right. But by the way, I also became part of that relationship too, because in other words, I entered that relationship where it was no longer just the two of them, it was now the three of us.
Two of them against you.
Yeah. But it was still the three of us.
Okay. Yaakov, real quick.
First of all, thank you. I really got a lot of it. My question is like this: is it all about being a real good friend, not giving constructive criticism?
The truth is, you do want to give constructive criticism, but I usually do it in a backwards way. In other words, I might say, I know that you came in, you said that you fight with your mom, and usually she asks you to wash the dishes and you don't like when she does that. But I realize that really you have to yell at your mom. And I'm going to tell you why. The reason is because if you don't yell at your mom, then your mom is going to feel all alone. She's going to feel that you're not paying attention to her. So if you get a sense, I'm not saying to the client, oh, that's bad that you're yelling at your mom. I'm trying to give him a reason where he himself realizes, oh, maybe my mom does. She keeps asking me the same question because your mom knows when she asks you to wash the dishes that you're gonna yell at her. Your mom knows that, right? But to give the client a different perspective, that the client will be able to say, but wait a minute, I don't want to yell at my mom.
Because
so I don't know if that's
because why wouldn't you want to do it?
Because if he's coming into therapy and he's saying that, officially I don't want to yell at my mom, then I'm going to tell him all the triggers that his mom is going to do. Right? Your mom is going to trigger you. Right? In other words, you don't control. If I would say to you, look, you don't control your life. Your mom controls your life. Right? You're not going to feel good about that. What do you mean my mom controls my life? I'm going to tell you how she does it. First of all, she's going to press your buttons. And one of the main ways she's going to press your buttons is she's going to ask you to take the garbage out, and she's going to ask you to wash the dishes. Because every time she asks you to wash the dishes and take the garbage out, you get upset, right? So that's a trigger for you, right? But you know and I know that she's going to press that trigger, right? So why don't we just plan right now, you and me, that you're going to yell at her like you always do.
And when it happens?
So when mom's going to say, take the garbage out, hopefully, if I did my job right, then the client will get a sense, wait a minute, how did my therapist know 2 hours ago that I was going to yell at my mother now? I think I'm being spontaneous, right? I think that each argument I yell at my mom, that it just happened to happen. No, it didn't just happen to happen. This has happened 2 months ago, last month, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. This is always happening, right? And all I'm letting the client know is that I know the game, and I'm letting you know the game. Now, if you want to play the game, that's up to you.
Like making the unconscious conscious.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was gonna. One of the things that I find that works in family systems when you have, excuse me, parents and a child, is when I point out to them how much control the child has and how little control the parents have, and just the observation itself triggers a lot of parents to sit up straighter and start taking more control.
Right, exactly. Exactly. You're just telling them the truth.
Just reflecting and mirroring back what's happening. And that. Okay, well, thank you, Yisrael, Elliot, thank you everybody for joining. We hope to see you in a couple of weeks. I think next week is going to be another off week. And we'll see you then. Good night. Bye.
Yeah.
Good night.